The story begins. Main character of family sits on the settee, and they feel truly happy. The father asks what the boy wants for his birthday. The mama shows her son a print of when he was a baby. Gangnam does not flash back posing naked or causing his mama trouble. The parents tell him that they do not flash back everything that's insolvable to flash back everything, thus the family decides to take further prints so that the little bone can flash back every moment of their life. Indeed, if the parents forget commodity, the family is at the sand, and the child looks veritably happy. He has collected a large bag of shells as a gift for his mom, and the parents suppose that they should go on recesses like this more frequently. For Gangnam, the boy pulls his parents to take a print with the gift he made for his mama, and they take a beautiful print together as a memory of that day. The mama is in the kitchen thinking that it's time to prepare regale. She turns on the gas cook stove and takes matches, but her son rushes into the room with that same print from the bee and says that he set up the print and will flash back everything about that day. Indeed, if the parents forget, the woman smiles at the child, lights the match, and the gas cook stove explodes, throwing the mama and son back. A man named Halaboji and the boy from that family is in the sanitarium. A Bobby and a firefighter asked the man how he saved the boy from the fire and what happened that day. Halaboji was sitting on a bench near the house and saw the family returning home. The child bowed to him and ran home with his parents. It reminded the man of his past. Passers-by panicked and called the rescue service, and Halaboji ran into the house. When the firefighters arrived, the man jumped out of the window with the child in his arms and landed on one of them. No one else survived in the hospital. The policeman and firefighter are about to leave after questioning Halaboji, but before leaving, the firefighter gives the boy his photo with his parents, the one from the beach. He was able to save it. Gangnam's eyes are closed with bandages and he drops the photo, realizing that his parents can no longer create memories when the bandages are removed from the child's eyes. He can't see the doctor his hand, he's blind, and his eyes are completely empty, but he saw something else, a black smiling creature looking at him, but he didn't tell the doctor. Halaboji inquired about what would happen to the boy, and the hospital workers responded that he was a typical orphan and would likely be sent to a children's home. The man didn't like this very much, but he never mustered the courage to do anything about it. He simply asked Gangnam if he could help in any way, but the boy replied that he was fine as long as his parents were happy. He would handle everything. The boy was indeed a very strong child, and the old man realized this immediately. Meanwhile, the boy had developed an imaginary friend, the same creature he had seen when he went blind. Dangan named him, and no longer felt so lonely. Saying goodbye to his savior, he promised to be strong and never give up. He tried, but the children in the orphanage were mean and didn't accept the blind boy. With a burn on his face, he was considered a monster, a freak. Nobody wanted to sit with him at lunch, and even when the boy was washing his hands in the bathroom, others preferred to come in later. His imaginary friend was the only one he could communicate with, and it saved him. Kick imagine read books to him, and they laughed together while the other children thought that this monster was not only blind but also crazy. In his notebook, everyone wrote nasty things, and the boy couldn't even see it. The facility was not adapted for the life of a blind child, and they tried to teach him like a regular child. Strange dreams about Keikamanjang haunted Gangnam. In these dreams, something very similar to Cake Hamajang but dark and evil urged him to kill anyone who would harm the baby. At times the darkness consumed him and he felt ready to kill his enemies, such as those who called him ugly. On that day he didn't harm anyone, but it seemed like he would have if the teacher hadn't intervened in time. The teacher took the boy to her office and asked who had hurt him, but he couldn't remember how he ended up there. The last thing he remembered was being in class. Gangnam knew that the teacher didn't want a blind boy in her class. He had overheard that conversation once. Halaboji couldn't leave the boy alone after what had happened. He couldn't forget about it. He visited the boy in the orphanage and eventually decided to adopt him. The process took a lot of time because the man was older and lived alone, but he gathered all the necessary documents and took Gangnam home. Now they were a family. The boy was happy with grandfather had taken him, but things were the same in the new school as they were in the orphanage. The other children couldn't accept someone like him. He had his grandfather and still had Kakama John. It wasn't difficult for him to accept the absence of friends at school. He started learning everything a blind boy could, and he progressed in mathematics, reading, and other subjects. As he grew older, he could solve different problems more easily and become more confident in himself. He solved a problem in class, and his imaginary friend Kekama John read the conditions and immediately gave him the solution. They walked home together, and Kekamajin guided the blind teenager down the steps when a group of boys who hated Gangnam decided to catch up to him. Ki Mahjong led his friends somewhere and eventually they'd ended up at a store. The boy protested that he should be saving money and that chips were wasteful, but the creature that had become his friend loved them very much. They were on their way home together when they were attacked by guys from school who beat up the blind classmate and called him an ugly freak. The boy worried about his grandfather, noticing that he had been beaten up. As he didn't want to worry his elderly caregiver, he started looking for a bandage in his bag to cover his wounds when Cake said that he could help even restore the boy's sight if he just said that he couldn't take it anymore and it would all end. Gangnam closed his eyes and admitted that this time it was really too much. His friend was happy to finally hear those words. The boy stood up and realized that he was engulfed in darkness. Halaboji realized that the boy had never stayed out so long before. He couldn't just sit at home and went to meet his foster son. He just hoped that Gangnam was okay. Walking along the road to school, he met the guys who beat up the blind boy. One of them regretted what he had done while the others were happy to teach a lesson to that freak. The boy's caregiver heard this and approached the group asking where Gangnam was, but they said they didn't know and suggested that the old man leave. The man frightened the teenagers with his gaze, and they were about to leave on their own when he slapped one of them and beat up the group, trying to find out where the boy was. Gangnam was in some strange place with Keikamanjang, who was now big and strong, squeezing his face, and the boy asked his friend to stop, but he continued, confident that it would heal the boy. Someone in the darkness asked why Keikamanjang was doing this, and the blind boy woke up. He tried to stand up and didn't immediately understand what was in front of his eyes. It was his hand, his own hand. Could he really see? Trying to get home, he saw his grandfather called him and ran to hug the man whom he couldn't see for so many years, but who had always taken care of him. The boy's body had completely healed. There was no scar on his face, no blindness left. The caregiver moved with Gangnam to a new home, transferred the boy to a new school, and no one knew that he had ever been blind and scarred. At first it was difficult for the main character to get used to living with sight, but over time it became easier. He liked how his face had changed since childhood. He loved to walk and look at the world. Only his imaginary friend never appeared again, or maybe he just hid in the dark corners. While strolling through the city, Gangnam came across a drunken man who was cursing because someone had scratched his car. The boy looked over for a while, just watching the situation, when the man turned to him and began insulting and cursing at him for just looking in his direction. The main character was even a bit flustered when a girl with a much firmer character than the shy boy approached him. She politely asked the man to leave Gangnam alone, and when the drunkard tried to fight, she didn't hesitate to fight him. Defending the stranger, the girl easily knocked the adult man to the ground and now asked him to leave again. And this time he listened. After all of this, the stranger had a small wound on her face, and the main character offered her a plaster, which he applied for her convenience. The brother of the girl came out of the building where martial arts training was held and asked if she had a date, to which she replied negatively, after which they went inside together. In the evening, Gangnam returned home late, and Halaboji was worried but didn't scold the boy too much, just sent him straight to bed as he had to go to school in the morning. On the way to school, the main character met a ginger cat who didn't want to let him go, laying on the boy's legs, and eventually convinced him to play with him. The boy thought he would make it to school because he left early, but when the cat finally fell asleep after playing, Gangnam realized he was late. He almost made it to the schoolyard when the gates were already closing, and he almost instantly ran across the street to make it before the gates closed. The boy who was closing the gate, the brother of the girl who helped the main character, was surprised at how fast he was in the school hallway. Gangnam accidentally overhears a conversation from the teacher's room where his homeroom teacher and other teachers are talking about the new student. They mentioned that the student transferred due to some problems, and they are worried that the school may face problems because of him. Despite this, Gangnam decides to introduce himself and greet his new teacher. When Gangnam enters the classroom, the teacher asks him to introduce himself. The boy remembers his sad experience in the orphanage where the children considered him a monster, and in his previous school where it was the same. He is afraid of being laughed at by his classmates and struggles to say his name and greeting. To his surprise, the new classmates show no anger in their eyes, only interest in him. Everyone accepts him well. The classmate next to him, who the teacher suggested he sit with, was nervous but kind to Gangnam. In addition, the girl who helped the main character the day before he came to school turned out to be his classmate. She introduced herself as the classmate sitting next to the main character and said that Habiel was the strongest in their class. They formed a small company of friends, among whom was also Habiel's friend named Jihai, who stood out for her hyperactivity and was also very happy to have a new friend. For a boy, it had always been a lonely outcast. Many things were new to him. He returned from school not alone for the first time, and he also liked being in school for the first time. On the way home, it turned out that Habiel was Gangnam's neighbor. The girl thought that the boy decided to escort her and tried to refuse help, but in the end it turned out that their apartments were located nearby. Habiel felt very awkward about the situation. It seemed she liked the new acquaintance. The next morning, the boy met the same cat again, but this time he brought him food. He also came up with a name for him, Nurin, and then went to school. They turned out that the girl with blonde hair was watching this. She also had a treat for the cat, but since he was already fed, she decided to do it later. Hanum was going to have lunch with the main character. They grabbed food trays when some guy walked by Hanum and purposely kicked him, knocking the tray out of his hands. Gangnam was about to say something, but his friend calmed him down and asked him not to do anything, as the guy had a gun and friends in the mafia, and it was better not to provoke him. The boy really held back and said nothing to the offender as they sat at the table eating their lunch. The main character heard the guy insulting his desk mate, discussing with his friends how he had beaten him up for many years and threatened Hanam's family. That's when Gangnam couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and asked the offender to shut up. Of course, this only angered the thug, and he decided to teach the newcomer a lesson about the local rules. To everyone's surprise, the boy could see the opponent's punch before it was thrown, which was strange, but it helped him dodge all the enemy's attacks. Hanam decided to protect his friend and stood between him and the bully, immediately receiving a punch to the face. Something dark whispered to Gangnam that his friend was now in the same position as he was many years ago, and will he endure and just watch it happen? When will the boy finally fight back in the end? The darkness said that if the main character couldn't do it himself, it would help him. Now the boy not only dodged attacks but also punched the bully in response with such ease as if it was normal for him to fight a stronger opponent and smile with a creepy grin. When the thug was already lying on the ground, Gangnam seemed to wake up and didn't remember how he beat up that person, but there was no time to think about it. The mob of the thug's friends was already coming towards him. The company wants to avenge their leader who was beaten up by a newcomer, and Gangnam is still confused because he doesn't remember what happened. The situation seemed hopeless until Jinhook, Habiol's brother, appeared and ordered the guys who were planning to attack the main character to stop. He also took their leader Jishin away for a talk in another place. Only then did the crowd calm down. Gangnam, worried about his friend who was hit hard on the cheek, immediately took him to the infirmary. There the nurse said that he would probably have a bruise and asked if the boy had fought with someone. The main character was about to tell the truth about what happened in the cafeteria, but his friend said that he just stumbled and there was no fight in the hallway. The boy asked his desk neighbor why he didn't tell the truth, as the seniors could have helped them. Anam told him about what he heard in the teacher's toilet, how the teachers were discussing the newcomer and that if he had any problems in this school he would be expelled. Gangnam, on the other hand, denied that he had fought with anyone. He only remembered how he dodged the blows in the schoolyard. A guy named Seoho, who had watched the fight from the sidelines, approached the gang of bullies who were in the cafeteria. He admitted the newcomer. When Gangnam first ran into the schoolyard, he tells the bullies not to touch Gangnam and that he will deal with the newcomer himself. It seems that these guys respect Seoho, so almost no one opposes him, but when one guy decides to object, he gets kicked in the face and immediately shuts up. The fair-haired girl who watched the main character feed the kitten and gave it a name sits in class with Seoho. Apparently they are close, as the girl tells him that he smells like cigarettes and he apologizes to her. Apparently the smell remained after meeting with the bullies. Two classmates are that the tough seal can be so sweet, but only with this girl, whose name is Dihyun, and the girl herself writes in her notebook in perfect handwriting a question that interests her. Who takes care of that ginger cat? Gangnam and Habiol return home together, but the girl has to go to training, so they say goodbye halfway. The main character enters his apartment. The light is not on. The guardian is probably not at home. He turns on the light and sees his imaginary friend sitting on the table and eating bread. Kaikmajang gets off the chair and runs into the boy's room without saying a word. The main character doesn't understand where his friend disappeared. He thought that he would never see him again after regaining his sight, but it turned out not to be the case. What's more interesting is why his imaginary friend is running away from him. Opening the door to the room, he didn't see anyone there. Looked behind the door, but it was empty too. Then Kaikmajang fell from the ceiling right in front of Gangnam and was very happy to see his friend. He asked if the boy missed him and started talking about various things, but he told the main character to answer the phone. The boy's phone was indeed ringing. Halaboji warned his foster son that he would be away for a week on urgent business, added that there was bread and a credit card on the table and if the boy wanted anything he could buy it, and asked him to call if there were any problem. This left the main character a bit stunned. He didn't understand what urgent business his grandfather could have. Kaikmajang suggested that they take a walk. They came to a bench not far from the house, and the boy bought a treat for his imaginary friend and decided to ask him where Kaikmajang had been all this time. The main character's imaginary friend said that he was almost out of energy after healing Gangnam's body, and then added that this was just the beginning. He explained that the loss of memories of a certain moment, unconscious actions, all of this was not just for nothing, and later the boy would learn everything and it was only temporary, so he shouldn't worry about it. After this strange explanation of the situation, the boy's imaginary friend said that it was time for him to sleep, but he didn't leave and always stayed inside Gangnam's.
That's it for today. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.